Welcome to this introduction to the discussion post called Looking from Different Points of View, Wendy Redstar and Gertrude Kasebier. And so here you see the contemporary artist Wendy Redstar and one of her photographic artworks. And here you see Gertrude Kasebier, a portrait photographer from the 19th century, and one of her photographic artworks. All right, introduction. In this discussion post, you will compare and contrast a series of photographic portraits made around 1897 by the pictorialist photographer Gertrude Kasebier and a series of photographs made in 2014 by contemporary Crow artist Wendy Redstar. So here you see the photographic portraits by Gertrude Kasebier. This was made in 1897. So just take a moment and kind of do the math. What year are we in now? And then how long ago was 1897? Quite a long time ago, right? And then we're going to think about Wendy Redstar, who's a contemporary Crow artist. This series was made in 2014. So that was a little while ago, right? You can do the math and figure out how long ago that was. And then, but much more contemporary, right, than Gertrude Kasebier. So Wendy Redstar, at the time of this recording, is healthy, a living artist, a young artist. And Gertrude Kasebier passed away a long time ago, back in 1934. All right, so we're going to compare and contrast, and already you might see some things you might compare and things you might contrast in between the two works. All right, let's start with Gertrude Kasebier. Her name is Gertrude Kasebier. She was born in Des Moines, Iowa in 1852, so in the middle of the 19th century. And she died in New York City in 1934. She became a very famous portrait photographer and had her studio in New York City. And here is a phonetic spelling of her name. So it's Gertrude Kasebier. And I always think of it like cheese beer, so like queso and beer, Kasebier put together. But that's just a joke between you and me, right? Don't tell anyone else that. Okay, so here she is. Gertrude Kasebier. So based on her childhood experiences, growing up playing with Native American children, Gertrude Kasebier immediately wanted to photograph the Sioux Native American Indians in the Grand Parade of Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West troupe. So the story goes that Gertrude Kasebier was in her studio, her photographic studio, where she ran her business in New York, and she looked out the window, and Buffalo Bill Cody ran a group of people, many of them Indians, called his Wild West troupe. And when they came into town to give these performances, they would walk down the city streets, right? As it was really good advertising. Gertrude Kasebier looked out her window. She immediately knew. So they were walking to Madison Square Garden because they were going to set up in Madison Square Garden and have several weeks of performances, the Indians and the other performers in Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West performance. So she knew immediately that she wanted to photograph the Sioux Indians, and she wrote to Cody and she invited them to come to her studio so that she could photograph them. And I'm going to just do a little aside about Buffalo Bill Cody. He performed his Wild West troupe of Sioux Native American Indian performers. So he formed a group and he set up performances where the native Sioux Indians, quote unquote, performed their typical lifestyle activities for white viewers in cities across the United States and in Europe. And so here's what it looked like. They would set up all these tents, and the Sioux the Native American Indian performers would set up like a typical teepee, right? And then the white viewers could come and see them, quote unquote, living and, cooking and doing all of these things. So it was, these are very problematic, when we look back on the ways that we are objectifying these performers. And so this is, this is very controversial, and he's a complicated person. But I just wanted to throw this in there here because mostly what we're talking about are Gertrude Kasebier and Wendy Red Star. All right, and I also want to point out that Cody was extremely financially successful. He eventually started to drink and he lost his money, but for a long time he made a huge amount of money taking this big troupe of performers on the road. Other performers like Annie Oakley performed with him as well. All right, and so, however, the Sioux Native American Indians in Buffalo Bill Cody's performances were forced to meet the white viewers' stereotypical expectations of what a Native American Indian should be. And so they weren't acting, as themselves. They were fitting into this mold of what viewers back then expected Native American Indians to be. And so Cody was a complicated figure, and he was also a key component in helping to create this romanticized legends of the Wild West. He promoted many of the stereotypical views that vilified Native American Indians, in other words, made them into the bad guys, quote unquote, and historicized the U.S. Army as the Army took land that the indigenous tribes had lived on for thousands of years. And some estimates say that European settlers killed as many as 56 million indigenous people over this 100-year period, and that includes South, Central, and North America. So again, I don't want to make light of this. This is a component in our story, but it's not our entire story for this discussion post. And if you want to read more about William Cody, this will appear as a PDF, and you'll be able to get that and click on these links if you want more information. All right, but now let's turn back to Gertrude Kasebier. Gertrude Kasebier was a pictorialist photographer. She was a portrait photographer. She had had her family. And then after her kids were grown, she went back to school and she got a degree and she became a portrait photographer. She was very, very successful. And so her work photographing the Sioux Indians was just one body of work that she completed in her lifetime. All right, so however, Gertrude Kasebier was very respectful of the Sioux Indians that she met and photographed. She cultivated long-term relationships with them. She photographed them again and again over many years. And she photographed them in her signature artistic style. And that's usually kind of a waist-up shot against a plain background. And she spent hours with each Sioux to create, she considered these to be biographical photographic portraits. So she spent a long time with each person, she got to know them, and then she made the photograph of them. And her style often emphasized simplified waist-up portraits against a plain background. They sometimes talk about her as doing kind of head and hands. All right, and so a lot of what we're looking at are these male portraits, portraits that she did of the male Sioux Indian. However, she also formed friendships with several of the Sioux that lasted for many years. And she also photographed Sioux women and children. And Zikalasha, who's also known as Redbird, or sometimes you'll see her as Gertrude Simmons-Bonnin, who's right here. And she was a writer, a teacher, a violin player, the voice of Indian rights. She's buried in Arlington National Cemetery. And Gertrude Kasebier, who you see right here and here, photographed Redbird, or Zikalasha, many times as well. So Gertrude Kasebier also photographed Sioux children, and she had to ask permission at first The Sioux elders would not allow her to photograph children, and she just kept photographing the elders. She built a relationship of trust with them, and eventually they allowed her to photograph the children as well. And again, you can get the PDF and click, and you can read more about the two Gertrudes here. All right, so that's a little bit of an introduction to Gertrude Kasebier. And again, I just want you to think about first in the 1890s, what it was like to be a woman, a photographer. So this is very unusual that a woman would have her own business in the same way that Gertrude Kasebier did. Gertrude Kasebier was was very supportive of other women becoming photographers and running their own business. And then for Kasebier to reach out to this sort of group of others, the Native American Indians, and to want to photograph them was also this, is just very unusual. And she was, you're going to watch another video about her. She was very determined, and she really knew her own mind. And she had a bond with Native American children when she was growing up and played with them. And she just knew that she wanted to photograph them. So just think about how unusual that is. And now we're going to move on. This is Wendy Red Star. So we're going to fast forward about 120 years to look at the work of Crow Native American Indian artist Wendy Red Star. And Wendy Red Star uses her artistic practice to explore her own Native American Indian or Crow identity. Red Star is interested in questioning the role of Native American Indians in today's culture. And here you can see she's made, uses a lot of kind of satire and kind of makes fun of, pokes fun at. And here you can see that she has put herself in the place of the heroine of a romance novel, right? And this made-up romance novel is called White Squaw, Sioux Wildfire. And so she's making fun of, kind of pointing out the stereotypes and the cliches that we still have about Native American Indians. And she's doing that in a way that she puts herself in their shoes, right? So she makes herself the heroine of this fake romance novel and puts herself on the cover to kind of allow ourselves to think about. And then here's a much more serious portrait that she made of herself. So she shows us how stereotypical views of Native American Indians and the cliches of the Wild West that Buffalo Bill helped create and spread are still active in today's culture. All right, so when Red Star was in the graduate school, so she got her Master of Fine Arts in Art at UCLA, she noticed that Native American artifacts or items used by Native Americans in the past were kept with dinosaur bones in the Natural History Museum in downtown Los Angeles. And so she went on one of her holiday breaks, she went to the Natural History Museum. And first she walked into a gallery where she saw, oh, here they have the dinosaur bones put back together. And then in the gallery right next to that, she noticed that there were many Native American artifacts. So these are pottery and items of clothing and jewelry that were worn by Native Americans. And she said she was really kind of creeped out by that fact and thought that, that Native Americans were being objectified in a certain way by being kept in the Natural History Museum along with, these bones of dinosaurs and other animals. So that was a really like a wake-up moment for her when she thought about making her own artwork. And the second thing was she noticed that this was a Native American Crow chief that was being used on advertising for a bottle of honest tea. And so she thought about that and she thought, well, what do people know when they're drinking that tea? What do they know about that chief? And then she thought, well, what do I know about him? And so then she went on a long research project where she found out all about them. And so that became part of her artwork. And so she used photographs made of so there was a delegation of Crow who traveled to Washington in 1880. So again, this is not very much, this is very close to the time when Gertrude Kasebier is making her work in the 1890s. And these Crow went to Washington to negotiate for the boundaries of their land, so how much of their land that they were going to keep. And so she found these old photographs that were taken by another photographer back in 1880, and she was able to digitally photograph them and print them out and use them as the basis for her own artwork. So just remember that she did not take these pictures. They were taken by another photographer in 1880. But then she changed them, right? She appropriated the images and then she changed them. And she's writing all these things. She's pointing out the meaning of all of this, of the objects, of the things that they're wearing. She's telling us the meaning of these chiefs, right? These are very talented men who had great accomplishments. And so she's letting us know what those are, because we wouldn't necessarily know that just by looking at the photograph. So that's the basis of her artwork. She reproduced them digitally and then altered them using red pens. All right, and so here's a quote that I thought was really interesting. Wendy Red Star says, "I grew up on the Crow Indian Reservation in Montana, and I always knew I was Crow. But I also knew that there was this sort of stereotypical Indian that society would want me to be. I think it's something that's so ingrained or embedded in the American psyche of what a Native person is because of this stereotypical idea of the Wild West." And so that becomes the basis. So here in the middle, you can see Wendy Red Star at one of her gallery openings, and she's signing catalogs for people. They're lined up to meet her, and you can see her artworks back here on the wall. And then this is from a series she did called The Four Seasons, where she's kind of poking fun at, although I think the photographs are just so beautiful, but she's kind of poking fun at this old-fashioned way of photographing in the studio, but where they're kind of pretending that it's outside, right? They're hanging a backdrop and they're putting these props so that it's like fake outdoors, right? And she does all the four seasons she puts herself in each of the seasons: spring, summer, winter, and fall. So that's another body of work that she did. And then she also works collaboratively with her daughter to make artwork. So it's really important. Wendy Red Star is, again, a big champion of women, of Native women and other women. And she works collaboratively with her daughter. And you can sort of think about comparing this to Gertrude Kasebier, who always was encouraging women to get into business, to start their own businesses. So both of these artists are very pro-women. And then Wendy Red Star, again, we saw these four images of the Four Seasons. And then here she is lecturing in a gallery. This is her artwork. This is a show of her work, and she's there lecturing to viewers. All right, so in conclusion, this assignment asks you to look at photographs of Native American Indians made by a white female photographer in the 1890s, Gertrude Kasebier, and to compare them to the artwork made by a female Crow artist in 2014, Wendy Red Star. And so again, this is a photograph that Gertrude Kasebier took of a group of Sioux Indians in her studio. You can sort of see them sitting. And this is one of Wendy Red Star's photographs. I also just wanted to show you, this is a mural size of one of that artwork from the Four Seasons. And you can see that this is in another gallery show for another exhibition by Wendy Red Star. All right, as you look at these two bodies of photographs, think about the different perspectives of the makers of the images. Both Kasebier and Red Star experience the implicit biases of society because they're women. Both Kasebier and Red Star champion the rights of women and help women move forward in their careers. But Red Star experiences an additional social bias because of her Native American Indian heritage. The different perspectives of these women are similar to what we could say the view from the shore. So you could sort of think about the Indians, the Native Americans, the first people standing on the shore and looking out to the ocean as the colonizers come in the boat. And then the view from the boat. So Gertrude Kasebier would be of European background who came. and colonized North America. And as you read about these women, think about their perspectives, their different perspectives, and how it influences the artwork that they made and their career paths as artists. All right, so I'm going to quickly go over the questions for the initial post. Question number 1, who are the two photographers, Gertrude Kasebier and Wendy Red Star? What are some aspects of Gertrude Kasebier's personal life and career as a photographer that interest you? And there is a lot of material on the actual assignment prompt about Gertrude Kasebier. There are a couple of very short videos that you can watch, and then you can read about her. So please do that. I know I'm asking a lot, but this is really interesting material. And so, you know, maximize your points, get your most points, and answer these questions in depth. Number two, you know, B, what are some aspects of Wendy Red Star's personal life and life as a photographer or artist that interest you? Again, I have 3 or 4 very short videos about Wendy Red Star. She's fascinating to listen to. I think you'll really like them if you give them a chance. And you can pick out some aspects of her personal life and life as a photographer that interest you. What are the similarities between their life stories and photographic journeys? What are the differences between their life stories and photographic journeys? When did Kasebier photograph? So you're going to want to go back and get that year. When did she start to take the Sioux portrait photographs? Oops, 1897. Did I slip? When did Wendy Red Star make her 2 bodies of artwork about crow figures responsible for the present-day boundaries of the tribe's land? And you'll find that that's around 2014. How many years apart did the 2 women photograph? You guys are going to have to do the math. What relationships does each have with her daughter? And I'll tell you that Gertrude Kasebier, later in her life, after her husband died, her daughter helped her run her photographic studio. So they both were very close. Now, question number 2, why? So based upon reading the text in this assignment prompt, so guys, I'm not asking you to go out and randomly Google. Please do not do that. Read the text and watch the videos that I include. It's all there for you. Why do you think she wanted to photograph the Native Americans who were working and traveling with the William Buffalo Bill Cody's Wild West shows at the turn of the 20th century? And again, read the text and watch the videos that I include, not just random ones that you find about Wendy, because I chose them carefully so that they answer certain questions. So why do you think she has chosen to focus her photography and artwork on the Crow people? So that's question number 2. Question number 3, I'm asking you to compare and contrast these 2 artworks. So the one on the left is by Wendy Red Star, and the one on the right is by Gertrude Kasebier. And I want you to describe both of the artworks. What do you see? Are they similar or different? As you compare and contrast the images, think about how each was made. In which way was each made similar or different? Did Kasebier take the photograph of Chief Irontail? Think about that. Yes, of course she did. Did Red Star take the photograph of Medicine Crow, Raven? No, she did not. This was taken in the 1880s, and she's borrowing it digitally to make her own artwork. What is the point of the red drawing on Red Star's artwork? And you want to make sure you listen to that video, because there's a video where she talks very specifically about why she draws on them in the way she does. And then what types of things does the red writing say? And again, in the assignment prompt, I blew one up for you so you'll be able to read it clearly. What do you think was the intent of each photograph? Why did each artist make their work? So think about that. And what can you say about the differences in the photographs made by Gertrude Kasebier, a white woman in 1897, and Wendy Red Star, a Crow artist, in 2014? Question number 4 and 5, compare and contrast. No, you guys, okay, I made a little boo-boo. Okay, so question 4 is, how did or do Gertrude Kasebier and Red Star support women in their careers in artwork? And the last question, number 5, do you like each of the artist's artwork? Why or why not? So that's going to kind of wrap that up. That's your initial post. Please, 400 words minimum. You guys, I know it sounds like a lot, but once you start writing, I don't think you'll have any trouble. Most people find these women pretty fascinating, and so just start answering the questions, and that'll be your initial post. You're going to reply to at least 2 posts from other students in the class. As you read your peers' posts, you can note any details you left out of your answer, which might help you study for the exam for Unit 3, and respond to any of the issues they raise about photographing from the point of view of an insider, and that would be from the shore, the point of view of the indigenous people or the Sioux or the Crow people, or an outsider like Gertrude Kasebier. Gertrude Kasebier was not a Sioux Native American Indian, so she was an outsider from their culture. And that would be from the boat or the point of view of the colonizer or the non-native person. All right, and so again, I just want to wrap up by, answering the question, why should you, do more research or care about these artists? And the reason is because I think they hold a lot for us today. Whether you're a photographer or an artist or not, one thing that I really love about Gertrude Kasebier is that she followed her gut. She looked out of her window one day, she saw those Native American Sioux Indians walking down the street with Buffalo Bill, and she was like, I want to photograph those people. And she didn't think about it, she didn't overthink it, she just, in those days, she would have texted William Cody, but then she just wrote him a letter and she said, I want to photograph. So whether you're an artist following your gut, whether you're a photographer following your gut, whether you're starting your own business and following your gut, you guys, that's just so important to recognize your intuitive hunches and to honor those and go for it. And the second thing that I really like about Gertrude Kasebier is that she built respectful friendships with the people that she worked with. She built friendships. She went out of her way. She invited these Sioux Indians to her studio. She spent hours talking with them. She formed bonds and friendships that lasted for years. And again, whether you're working for someone else or starting your own business, or whether you're an artist or a photographer, it is so important to create respectful relationships, to build trust, so that people get to know you. And everybody benefits when you do that. So that's a lesson that you can take from Gertrude Kasebier. And from Wendy Red Star, I really love the way she values and validates her own identity, right? Her own cultural identity as a Native American. She also speaks really clearly. So, Native Americans were treated, it's hard to say how badly they were treated, right? And I'm speaking very quickly here, so I don't want to seem disrespectful, but, they really lost a lot. They lost their land. They lost the ability to live their own culture. They were forced into the ways of the Europeans. And Wendy Red Star, she doesn't get angry. Sometimes when I want to express myself, I'm so angry. She is not angry. She is very articulate. She speaks slowly and clearly, and she lets you know what happened. She lets you know the truth. And so I feel like that's a really great thing that we can all benefit for. She stands up for herself. She stands up for her ancestors. And also, I want to point out Wendy Red Star's working practices again. She's very in the moment. She'll start with one thing, like she describes in the video. She starts with this Pendleton cloth, and then she decides she's going to make some costumes out of that. And then she said, and I don't know what I'm going to do with them yet. I'm going to maybe photograph them. But she has a lot of faith in her own process. And once she's in the moment, she does it step by step. And it propels her from one thing to the next. And again, you can take that as an artist, as a photographer, as a businessman, a businesswoman, a business person. It's a great way of working and allowing yourself to kind of follow the breadcrumbs on the path. And the last thing, of course, I'll say for both of them is that they're very collaborative when they work, and that they build a really strong community of women. So for the women out there, sometimes we look and we see, I don't see any community. Well, you got to get out there and build it, just like these two women did. So I really love them, and I find them, every time I read about them again, I find them inspirational for my own artwork, for my own life. So I hope you do too. And again, I'll just leave you with a quote from Gertrude Kasebier. She says, "I earnestly advise women of artistic taste to train for the unworked field of modern photography. It seems to be especially adapted to them, and the few who have entered it are meeting a gratifying and profitable success." So she was telling women, come on in, the water's good. You can start your own business. You can have, your own business. And sometimes it just takes one person to tell you that, to kind of point the way for you. So I hope you enjoy this discussion, and you can always let me know your comments or questions.